So let's get this program rolling. I'd like to introduce our moderator for our first discussion, which is going to be a dynamic discussion with our Assistant Commissioner, Jeff Brown. And this is going to be, Bill Caruso is going to come up, and Bill, as we all know him very fondly, he's going to kick off the first panel with a discussion on cannabis policies. He's Archer's leading cannabis lawyer and heads their cannabis law practice, providing legal guidance on marijuana-related business issues, including strategic planning and transactions, employment law, land use, zoning, municipal law, and healthcare law. Bill has been a public policy advisor and a board member of the New Jersey Cannabis Industry Association. He's leading in this area, in this industry in New Jersey for years now. We really, really look forward to this discussion, and we know that Bill is going to make it a vibrant discussion. Let's welcome Bill and Assistant Commissioner Jeff Brown.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for being here with us today. So I have the privilege of introducing my friend, Assistant Commissioner Brown. Now, before I give you all the details on his background, I want to just characterize this as, for those of you that have been involved in government and politics, you know the challenges of getting through some very difficult things. Sometimes the right people come along at the right time in the right role, and I cannot in any way describe better the person sitting next to me for the job that he's been asked by the governor and the state to perform. And we're going to talk a little bit about some of those highlights, Jeff, in the short amount of time you've been in government. But you have a stellar background, but I think the short time that you've been in government really is the most defining act to be able to explain just what a tremendous public servant you've been thus far. So we're going to get into that. But the formalities of Jeff's background, Jeff is the Assistant Commissioner, a new department position in the New Jersey Department of Health for the medicinal marijuana program that was created. The program was created some time ago, but the new position was created recently through the executive order of the Governor Murphy. Jeff's background prior to serving in this capacity was he previously was the Vice President of Policy at the Hospital Alliance of New Jersey, and was the former executive director of the QI Collaborative at New Jersey Healthcare Quality Institute. He has earned his bachelor's degree from Rutgers University here in New Jersey. And I think what you will see from Jeff is, in addition to his public policy background, he is Jersey as Jersey gets. So ladies and gentlemen, please join me in a very warm welcome for our Assistant Commissioner, Jeff Brown.
Thanks, Bill, and thanks, everyone. So good morning. Before we get into it, I just wanted to thank NJBIA for hosting this event. Actually, one of the first events I spoke at in this new role was to the NJBIA Health Policy Committee. It was a lively discussion about the expansion of medicinal marijuana, and so thank you for hosting this, and thank you for all you contribute to public policy debates here in New Jersey. And thank you, Bill, for that very kind introduction.
Absolutely. So we have a good program here for you today. Just two pieces of housekeeping before we get started. Number one, I just want to let everybody know, if there was any confusion out there, that there are no free samples available today. So if you were looking back in the buffet, that's not going to happen. But good news, please stay to the end, because Assistant Commissioner just informed me that we are going to be raffling off a medical marijuana license at the conclusion of today's program. That's a joke. No, we're not. Do stay to the end of today's program, though, and in addition to this panel, there's some other exciting panels coming up later on. So let's get into this, Jeff. We've got a brief amount of time here to talk about a lot. You walk in the door with an announcement from the governor. Now, a little bit of background here. We created a program in New Jersey back in 2010 through statute and then through some regulatory efforts that went on. The program was adopted in statute under a previous governor. It was implemented under then Governor Chris Christie. The program sort of remained stagnant, though. It was ahead of its time, I think, when it was first being adopted, but many folks, particularly the patient community, were frustrated. There were two statutory changes that occurred prior to the Governor Murphy assuming office. There was a change in allowing for PTSD, and there was a change, a very critical change, allowing for the treatment of minors, because we're having so many issues related to minors, particularly in epilepsy and other areas where it can be treated. So prior to that, there really wasn't a lot. And the governor comes into office, creates a 60-day study. You show up on the doorstep of a major announcement. Tell us what that was like. Right after the executive order, your first day on the job, give us some context of the announcement and what was changing and
Absolutely. So, by way of a little bit of background, I come from the broader, I think, more traditional health policy world. Hospital financing, Medicaid policy, payment reform, healthcare reform. In fact, I remember, my first health policy job was with New Jersey Citizen Action, and we were trying to pass a state-based exchange under Governor Christie. And I remember debating with, then Christine Stearns was at NJBIA, and she was fighting for, very much an open market model, and, we were fighting for more of a consumer-driven model. But, really, more, that's really my background. And so when I was offered the opportunity to come and join Governor Murphy's administration as Assistant Commissioner for Medicinal Marijuana, it was a little outside of, I guess, what I was used to dealing with, but once I dove into it, I think I found a lot of the similar challenges that we see elsewhere. It's about patients getting access to care. It's about cost. It's about ensuring that really the most vulnerable people who rely on cannabis as a medicine are able to get it and are able to essentially access their treatment effectively. So I came in. My first official day was March, I believe it was 26th, which was the press conference with the governor. So, incredibly privileged. Not many people on their first day get to, be there for a press conference with the governor. So that was fun. But then it was really hitting the ground running. I mean, if you've seen our Executive Order 6 report that the Department of Health put out, that was really the roadmap that I've been following with the staff at the Division of Medicinal Marijuana. And it's a really robust and really well done report. I can't take credit for any of it because it was done before I came on board. But what I can take credit for, along with the incredible staff that I have at the Department of Health, is really taking that roadmap and implementing it. And so, a couple things I want to highlight, going back to ensuring that people have access to this important therapy, some of the things we did, and some of the things that I think were impediments in the last administration. So first, we reduced fees across the board. It used to be a $200 fee every 2 years to register for the program. That was cut in half. It's now $100. We also expanded eligibility for a reduced fee of $20 every 2 years. It used to be just for people on government assistance. Now it's government assistance, seniors, and veterans. As of today, we're trending towards 60% of the patient population qualifying for that reduced fee of $20 every 2 years. I'm hopeful that in the future we can continue to reduce that fee even more. Another thing we did, and this is probably in combination with the reduced fee, most responsible for the patient population explosion that we've seen, is expanded the number of conditions that are available for treatment with medical cannabis.
Just pause for a second. Give us an idea of the scope. So the governor walks in the door in January. Where are we at patient-wise?
We had 17,023 patients when Governor Murphy took office. At the end of this month, we're going to be at 40,000. So we've more than doubled. I think we have the opportunity to potentially almost triple by the end of the fiscal year or by the fall of this year. So really significant expansion. And we added 5 new conditions, and they're really categories of conditions. And those are chronic pain of musculoskeletal disorders, chronic pain of visceral origin, anxiety, migraine, and Tourette's syndrome. And I say categories of conditions because if any of you are physicians or work with physicians, this is important. If you go back and look at we have a medical marijuana review panel. It's all researchers and pharmacists, physicians who look at whether or not a particular condition, whether or not there's evidence to support the use of medical cannabis. We added these conditions based on their recommendations, and if you go back and look at their recommendations, there are actually long lists of conditions under these categories. So I'll just use one example: chronic pain related to musculoskeletal disorders. That includes fibromyalgia to the extent you have chronic pain. That includes opioid use disorder if it was developed from the treatment of chronic pain with opioids. That includes arthritis. It includes a whole number of conditions under that umbrella. But that has been really most responsible for the patient expansion. And we continue to see people coming in with both types of chronic pain, anxiety, Tourette's, and migraine.
What's amazing about this, and Michelle hinted at the fact that the governor really campaigned on the legalization movement. That was really where most of the focus was as he came into office. But some of the biggest successes have occurred in a very short amount of time on the medical side, and you've talked about the patient expansion side. And we will talk a little bit about demand in a second, but I just want to talk about the doctor side, because you've done a lot in that respect, both in outreach and also streamlining. Can you maybe talk about that?
Yeah, so one thing we did immediately through administrative action was just make it optional for physicians to be listed publicly. There's a public registry. Patients can go onto our website, find a physician. We heard from doctors that, maybe they had, a handful of patients that they thought would be appropriate for medical cannabis. They didn't want to be publicly listed, and so we made that optional. Now, still substantially, I would say the vast majority of physicians do choose to be publicly listed, which is good, because I think a lot of the stigma is disappearing. The other thing is that the commissioner, who's a physician himself, has been doing a series of grand rounds at our academic medical centers around the state. So he did his 8th last week, and since he started doing those grand rounds, we've added almost 300 physicians to the program. So we were at about 500. We were at like 600 when he started the grand rounds, and we're up close to 900 right now.
That's incredible. So we talked about some of the good. There were obviously some challenges as well. So I'm going to ask you a more pointed question. As we see this phenomenal rollout occurring, when do you start to panic and decide, uh-oh, we may have a supply shortage here? And maybe I'll ask you that. Do we have a supply shortage in the state?
Yeah, so that's a great question. Globally, no. We do not have a supply shortage. Where we have issues, we have had individual ATCs who have had supply crunches. We haven't seen it in the market as a whole. We still have, and this is something we monitor on a weekly basis. I think last time I looked, we had like 3,500 pounds of product total in the market when you look at all bulk product and package and everything. Now, where we do see issues is when patients rely on a specific strain, a strain that might be in high demand, and because it's such a high demand strain, ATCs will run out of that, or and ATCs are what we call dispensaries. They will run out or run low, and they'll limit patients. We're looking at supply all the time. Now, one of the biggest challenges, I think, in the E06 report, there were a number of statutory recommendations that we think will continue to reduce barriers for patients. Back when I first came on board, I think there was hope that we could get some of these issues resolved legislatively, at least on the medical side, by early summer, by the time budget season was done. That was not the case, and so initially our plan was to, I think, look at what came out of the legislation, and then deal with the procurement side. But once we got into the summer, and there was a little bit of stalemate on the legislative side, we were looking at the patient enrollment numbers, and we realized, look, we have to go. We have to do this, and so we had to procure 6 new licenses under our old rules. Well, they're still the current rules, which require vertical integration, which means that businesses have to do all 3 parts of the supply chain: cultivate, manufacture, and dispense. When our new rules, which will be adopted in short order here, will allow for procuring non-vertically integrated licenses. So, entities that specialize in cultivation, or specialize in manufacturing, or specialize on the retail side in dispensing. But what we were looking at, we realized we had to get some businesses into the pipeline to get permitted as soon as possible, which is why we released that RFA in the summer, and which is why there were relatively quick turnarounds in terms of getting those applications in.
So let's talk about that process. Yeah, we have the late summer RFA. You have 800 people show up at the War Memorial on a warm day in August. Talk a little bit about that. Talk about the process. Were there surprises there? Were you surprised about the amount of people that showed up, about the amount of applicants?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, we were very surprised. So there's 3 rooms that we've used in the past at the War Memorial. There's a small room, then there's a slightly bigger room, and then there's the big room. So the day before the event, we had to move to the big room because we essentially were ready for up to like 400 people, and we eclipsed that the day before, and we had to switch to the big room. So registrations were coming in until basically the night before, and we were certainly surprised, but it shows the interest in this business, and I think it it was a good thing to see just how many people showed up to that event. It also, was a little frightening in terms of, the number of applications we figured we'd probably be getting at that point. But, ultimately we got 146 applications from 103 different applicants, really strong applicant pool. It was, for any of you who worked on the application, it was a very in-depth application. I mean, we asked about everything from business experience to, basically plans for cultivation and manufacturing and dispensing, to commitment to the community, Jersey residency, involvement of minorities and women and veterans in your business. Really ran the gamut, and we did get a very strong applicant pool.
So let's look forward a little bit. We've got six new licensees that are coming on board right now. You've got the 6 that are currently operating in the state for a total of 12. It seems we're done with vertical integration, at least by license at this point. You've got statutory change coming. You've got changes at the federal level coming. We've got legalization coming. So in the round robin of the last 5 minutes here, give us some insight into what's coming next from your world from a licensing standpoint. Give us some insight on what you're expecting out of legislation. And I'm going to ask you this question. Ultimately, can a medical marijuana program survive alongside recreational legal effort? Go for it.
Absolutely. So first, let me just touch on sort of aftermath of the RFA to the extent I can. Now we're still in the appeal period for applicants, so limited in what I can say. But I think overall, we're
tight room.
Overall, I think we're generally pleased with what came out of it. And I think particularly if we look at some of the aspects like diversity. So if you look at S10, which is the medical bill, there are some quotas or set-asides for minority-owned businesses and then women and veteran-owned businesses. I think it's 15. I think where it stands, it's like 15% and 15% for a total of 30%. Today. Obviously, that's all being debated. We hit that in this RFA. So 2 out of the 6 at least, and then some had investment groups that were either minority-owned or women-owned. So we can say that 2 of those applicants were either minority-owned or women-owned. So that's 33%. So we hit that, which is good. But that's something that we're going to continue to look at as we refine our procurement strategy. We're going to look at ways to involve smaller businesses, I think particularly on the retail side. Now, this does require capital, which is, that's a barrier unto itself to entry into the market. But where do we go from here? I want to highlight some things that are coming out of our shop probably over the next month or so. So the first one is a biennial report, which will look at do we have enough ATCs in the market. It'll look at our projections for where we think we need to be. All I can say right now is that 12 is not enough. That is we're 100% sure of, and this is for medical alone. The next thing you'll see is our rules finalized that are in the proposal stage now, and that will allow us to procure based on endorsements. So an endorsement for cultivation or manufacturing or dispensing, and if an entity is able to compete effectively for all 3, then they in essence can get a vertical license. But so what's coming in the big uncertainty regarding legalization, and how does that affect the medical market? I think there are a couple things. Number one, from the patient side, it comes down to simple economics and sort of behavioral economics. So, if it's a hassle or it's expensive or more expensive to buy on the medical market or to, see doctors to gain eligibility and that sort of thing, then patients aren't going to do it. It's as simple as that. If it's easier for them to just go to the dispensary and buy on the recreational or adult use market, then they will do that. So what we're trying to do is really reduce all those barriers before we get to an adult use scenario, so that patients want to stay in the medical market, because it does have medical benefits. Research is grown by the day. And if a patient can benefit from it medically, then it really should be delivered in concert with their physician. And and maybe it doesn't have to be a physician; it could be an APN or a physician assistant, but with their healthcare provider, and it should be monitored as such. Now, this is a very generally engaged patient population. Some are, very well educated and they know what they want, and that's fine. But I do think that it does really come down to simple economics in that regard. The second thing I'll say is that New Jersey has an incredible infrastructure when it comes to pharmaceutical research and when it comes to sort of traditional healthcare entities, whether it be hospitals, physician groups, et cetera. And I think we could we lose an incredible opportunity if adult use comes along and just swallows the medical program. I mean, when you talk to researchers who are dialed in internationally, they talk about places like Israel and Holland and Germany because these are places where it's more accepted amongst the physician community, and the barriers to research have been they really aren't there. Particularly in a place like Israel. So New Jersey could almost has an opportunity to become that level in the United States, because we don't, there are pockets here and there in the country right now, and it's really around the people who are really driving this. Like there's a number of researchers, some are doing NIH-funded research, and so you see these pockets, but you don't really have like a regional powerhouse in that regard. And so, it's my hope, being Jersey-born and bred, that our state can really step up and be the leader in that regard, particularly on the East Coast.
You've got some sparks here already, so
yeah.
That's good. It's good places to cultivate. So that's contingent, though, to some extent on federal law changing, right? Now making it a little bit easier.
Yeah, it is. Certainly, there are big barriers to getting research funded on the federal level as it remains a Schedule I drug. I think we're looking at ways to incentivize the industry to invest in research as well. So, it was a piece of the last RFA that was one whole criterion we looked at. Commitment to research. We want to keep looking at that. I know it's something that's being debated in the legislature, potentially having a joint permit between academic medical centers and dispensaries, because which could help provide some legal cover for academic medical centers to get more involved in research. So there are different models, and we're looking at different models as well. We have proposals before us to do different analyses in concert with Rutgers, and we're looking at potentially putting together an event at some point this year focused on research and medical cannabis. It's that to me is where the most opportunity is, just because, particularly in this country, because of the federal barriers, we haven't seen as much research as we should, particularly as it relates to certain conditions. Chronic pain, nausea related to chemotherapy and stuff like that. There's very strong evidence, but some of the other conditions, like Crohn's is one, and there's very promising small scale studies, but we need to see more. There's enough that we have a number of Crohn's patients in the program who are benefiting, but we really need more research there. In Israel, they're doing a study on severe autism and CBD, and that has the potential to have some really promising results. So, we want to see that stuff happening here in New Jersey.
There's some good news on that front. I mean, they can't agree that today is Wednesday down in Washington, but there is some agreement on this issue moving on a bipartisan level. So, listen, you've been very gracious on this portion of our discussion. I want to open up to the audience, though. So if folks have a question, the Assistant Commissioner sitting here at your disposal, just ask that you raise your hand, identify yourself. There are people from the Treasurer's Office here as well who will audit your tax returns if they don't like your question. So, any questions from the audience? I'm going to start. I'm going to start. Medical insurance coverage. Yep. What do you think? I mean, is that happening? Do you see it happening more? Because that will help sustain a medical economy if there's coverage.
Yeah, and I think so research ties into that, because what insurance companies, so let's take aside the federal, Schedule I status, because certainly for large health insurers to even look at this, that has to change, because they all get the big ones. They have Medicare business, they have Medicaid business, they enjoy tax benefits on their employer-sponsored coverage, federal tax benefits. So that needs to change in order to get the big insurance companies to even take a serious look at this. But what I will say is once that does change, then they're going to want to see strong research to support its use, and then we're going to see how does medical cannabis save money, result in better outcomes for patients. So I mean that's really where we need to get to. I will say on the insurance side though, in New Jersey, there's actually been a few cases where judges have ruled that workers' comp insurance companies have to cover medical cannabis, and I had an opportunity to speak at a workers' comp conference recently, and there was a lot of interest and a lot of questions from judges who really saw this, particularly in that population who, if someone's injured on the job severely, might be relying on opioids to manage their pain. They see this as a really great alternative for a population that's really susceptible to opioid addiction and all the really negative side effects that come along with that.
Yes, sir.
Good morning. I'm Rob Menaker with Maxim Cigars.
Oh, thank you. I had a big enough mouth. Is there still talk about creating a state bank, and if so, how would that affect the cannabis industry?
So that's, DOH doesn't regulate banks, totally outside of our purview. I can't really comment on that. What I can say is that access to banking is a big issue for this industry. There is one bank in New Jersey that does do business with the cannabis industry, so I think we're perhaps a little better off than some states in that regard. There actually is a financial institution that will do business with them, but that is an issue, and that ties back into the federal Schedule I status and the fact that the big players aren't really gonna look at this industry seriously until that changes.
Yes, sir.
I think you touched on this, but I'm sorry. I'm just asking about the date or projection that you may know for the next round of RFAs.
No date. All I can say is that it's still our intention to move forward with additional opportunities. We certainly cited it back in the RFA over the summer. That has not changed. I think our timeline has just changed a little bit. Certainly, like any state agency, we deal with a finite set of resources, finite capacity. But like I said, 12 is not enough, and our patient population continues to grow. So we're very cognizant of that.
Yes.
Jeff Kelly.
Yeah, I'm coming. Sorry.
Assuming full legalization of recreational use too, is that going to be two separate retail outlets, one for medical and one for recreational?
I think that ultimately will be determined in the legislation. I'll just give you my opinion on that. I do think that you want patients to be able to sort of access their medicine wherever's most convenient to them. So, and in my mind, it should be businesses could choose to participate in one market or the other, or both, depending on what their business model is. And I mean, our priority at health is always going to be ensuring that the patients in the program have adequate access to medicine.
And I think what you see, and what we've been sort of contemplating, again, it's a moving target with legislation, a option to grandfather those that are already in, so the current 12 would have the option to be in the legal recreational space if they choose, but no mandate too. And if you look at other states who've managed this very well, they have a medical program running alongside a recreational program. One point of entry, but two different rooms, potentially, medical products segregated from recreational products. I mean, this is all going to get fleshed out both in statute that's not yet been developed and signed into law, and then obviously through a regulatory process. But there's models out there, I think, to look at. And the intent seems to be to grandfather those that are there now into the recreational process. I think I saw one more hand. Yes, sir.
Right here. Dave Knowlton.
Good to see you, sir.
Care. Hi, Jeff.
Hi, Dave.
how do you deal, if the legislation doesn't move forward right now, how are you going to deal with the 3 separate regions? Are they going to be maintained? Are they going to be maintained vertically integrated? Or are they going to be maintained in separate sections? Because I believe that's statutory. So how do you deal with that?
Yeah, so the question was, in the original statute, it breaks New Jersey into 3 regions, north, central, and south, and that is further espoused upon in our regulations. And a permittee, Dave is with Compassionate Care Foundation, so they're in the southern region, and I see George here too, also in the southern region. And so, by our regs can keep them in the southern region in terms of setting up satellite locations and things of that nature. We certainly have the ability to look at future regulatory changes in that regard. They are, they do come from the statute originally. I think particularly in future procurement rounds, related to dispensaries or cultivation sites or manufacturing sites, those regions will continue to play a role. I think, in terms of those with current permits, that's something that we can certainly talk about more through the regulatory process.
Hi, has there been any research done as far as how much is in someone's system to make they're impaired to do their job? Like, how is that being monitored?
So I'll just say one thing, because I do know this is coming up with the next panel on employers. I know that's an area where I think more research needs to be done. But I do think that employers, just as there's no research that says 3 Percocets is too much to go to work, or 1 Valium is too much to go. Like it's the same thing. We're talking about a medicine on the medicinal side, and so one huge problem for patients right now in New Jersey is that not only are there no employment protections in the law, it actually goes the opposite way and says nothing in here will require employers to accommodate the use of medicinal marijuana. So we've actually seen other states where state Supreme Courts have ruled in favor of patients where there are no employee protections because of its status as an actual medicine. That has not happened in New Jersey because of what's in the statute. So in my mind, that is one of the most critical pieces that needs to be addressed in legislation. I'm thankful that S10 does currently do that. It basically says that the most recent language that a positive drug test in and of itself and a medical card is not grounds for for taking adverse employment action against a patient. Again, my advice to employers in that context would just be to treat it like any other medicine in that regard. I mean, if somebody looks like they're intoxicated and they need to be, they can't be due to their job duties, which is honestly most jobs, then use your senses to determine that. But I mean, really, if somebody is a patient, that should not be grounds in and of itself to take adverse reaction or adverse action.
We have time for one more question.
Hi, good morning. Joe Coyle, Edison Chamber of Commerce. Can you touch on the small business market and what vision you would see? I know that's not on the table today, but also can you touch on the food manufacturing and whether the current existing facilities, such as a bakery, has to do a complete refit? It kind of seems like we're moving around kryptonite. And is it, for those who do a small quantities, baking 10 trays of brownies needs to have a security force and all this oversight? Do you ever see it dissipating later, or what level can they get into the market when they're only doing small amounts of quantities to get into the market in food manufacturing?
So here, I think that's something that changes if we get to an adult use scenario. I mean, what we're dealing with now in a medical program only is that it is only legal, even under state law, for people with a card that gives them legal protection to possess medical cannabis. So that's people who work at alternative treatment centers, people who run alternative treatment centers, patients, caregivers, and people at the state who are responsible for regulating the program. So as long as that's the case, and then yeah, there's going to be protections that need to be built into anything to prevent diversion, to ensure that product is maintained, to ensure the right steps are taken to ensure that nothing happens with inventory. Even in an adult use context, I mean, let's not keep in mind that barring federal change, this is something that's totally illegal in some states. And so, even in that case, I think the state does have a duty to ensure that product is not getting diverted out of state. And that's why you have a lot of states setting up, enterprise level inventory management systems and regulations to prevent diversion and ensure product stays where it should be and gets to where it goes. And that gets at another point too that Michelle raised in her opening. And I think you said it was something along setting up a market responsibly or something like that. And I really like that phrase, and I think that's something that I'm thinking a lot about. And I think that should really be the guiding factor in both medical and in adult use, because what we don't want, given the overall federal landscape and landscape in other states, is we certainly don't want sort of you don't want to create market conditions that aren't sustainable for businesses, and I think you're seeing that in some states where there's so much money that wants to get into this industry and so many people, so many interests that when you sort of totally open stuff up, everybody rushes in, everybody is opening up cultivation sites, and prices like bottom out, but then, and this is happening in Oregon, the cost of compliance is more than, and the cost of running your business is far more than what you're getting for, on the recreational market or the medical market. So, I mean, we don't want to set up market conditions that make it impossible for business to succeed, or just, set up some sort of crisis down the road where like 50% of the market isn't going to be able to sustain itself. We do need to create a space and the ability for small businesses to get involved, and I think it's very much a balancing act there, because again, we don't want to, on the medical side, certainly we don't want to over procure to the point where we're creating negative business conditions for the participants in the market. Because I mean, yes, we want to bring down prices for patients. We want patients to have the access that they need. But if that access ultimately fails, then we're also not doing our job.
Well, and I would only add one other point to this. The gentleman brings up an unbelievable point about the diversity of this economy that can be created here. Homegrown, sorry, another pun, Michelle. But you really can look at a variety of different folks that can get themselves engaged and involved in this new industry that's going to be created. We just talked about a bakery, for example, that's basically a food processor. But currently, right now, and despite the efforts, best efforts of the department, and they have been very outside the box in expanding this program, we're limited. We're limited by the statute. And so while the big shining object of legalization continues to chug along in the legislature, there's S10 that's moving along as well. It's sort of a quiet partner that's been, I think, less controversial, I guess is better to say. But there are some relevant changes in that bill, particularly related to edibles, however you want to define edibles. And our market is limited right now. We are hamstrung right now in the medical market in New Jersey, both in size and scope. And I will give some credit. We've got two major players in the market right now who are also operating under, handcuffs essentially to service a population that, is maybe sometimes too sick to smoke cannabis, and they're limited in their options. But I give credit to these folks in the industry that have been outside the box as well. So the statute matters, the changes matter, and the advocacy matters. The lobbyist in me would be remiss if I didn't say to you, if you are supportive of this effort, make sure you stay in touch with what is going on, both on the legalization effort, but also S10 as it marries into this effort, and then certainly what is going on in the department. The gentleman asked about new licenses coming out. The department's website is phenomenal. They keep people very well informed. And this assistant commissioner and your commissioner and your deputy commissioners have been very accessible out in forums like these. So that is the end of this segment of the program, ladies and gentlemen. I want to thank you, Assistant Commissioner, for spending time with us today. You've been outstanding.
Thank you, Bill.
Applause, please. And listen, thanks to all of you for coming out. This is an ongoing debate. It's an exciting one. And thank you for your time and your effort for being here today. We've got exciting 2 other panels coming up, so stick around. Thanks.
Yeah, I want to say... We promised a robust discussion, and that surely was a kickoff to a robust discussion. Thank you so much. Just a few points that I note. Really encouraged to hear that we're paying attention to the best practices in other states, and the whole idea of responsibly standing up a sustainable market is significantly important. Slow and steady wins the race, not the rush to the big shiny object. So that's very, very important to us as those who represent business community, and we don't just want to create, I say every day, we wake up every day, create jobs in the state of New Jersey. If we don't have a workforce to fill them, and that job is not sustainable, we haven't finished our job. So that's very important. You know, the whole idea of research and development, we are an innovation state. Our vision at NJBIA is to reclaim our stature as the innovation state. And this looks to be an opportunity where we can leverage an innovation ecosystem around research and development. I know some of our higher ed institutions now are starting to stand up majors in this space, and it's going to take them some time to catch up as well. But if we can stay ahead of the research and development, I think that's also going to lead to the sustainability of the market on the other side, and creating that innovation ecosystem, I think, could be a great, great opportunity for us. Just my last comment, and this is going to be the nice dovetail to our next panel, but the whole idea of safety in the workplace, that's going to be the topic of discussion. You know, BIA, we did not come out for or against legalization. We said all along that we knew it was going to come, and the thing we were myopically focused on is workplace safety. And I know that is the concern of our government as well. But that most recent language that you mentioned, I have to do a shout out to, you know, our colleague Mike Wallace, who's been in there all about workplace safety and got the amendment that we needed to ensure that our companies are going to be protected going through this. So very important that we know that that's an important aspect for our policymakers as well.